Good morning to everyone. My name is Stefano Gesuelli and welcome to the webinar of today from the CIAT. And I hope that this webinar is finding you well in this new situation post pandemia, and definitely welcome here to share with us and with all of you your different thoughts about the information and communication technology. We definitely believe that this is a great added value because in this moment in time, we are facing new, different challenges and new challenges from the current situation, from the current sanitary situation, health situation, also for tax administration and taxpayers. So definitely every day more we realize how information and communication technologies are really important for the day by day of the tax administration. And this is why we are working with CIAT and with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in order to provide tools and knowledge about the application of the ICT to the core processes of the tax administration. And I think that I'm pretty sure that today we'll find the new ideas for everybody here to share with our colleagues back in the capitals or in our different countries or institutions. And in order to make some, let's say, just to have the house a little bit organized, we have some very quick ideas to share with you in order to how this webinar is going to be going on. First of all, of course, now I'm going to present all the speakers, myself and all the speakers that we are going to have along this morning. And of course, they will share direct experience on the topic. They are all very skilled professionals with a large experience in these topics, and not only in this topic, of course. So definitely it's something that I'm very happy that I can list, and I hope you will be happy as well in order to get the experience as well. There will be some polls, let's say some interactive polls that will be shared with you during the webinar. Of course, we try to have a small, let's say, a small rest, 10 minutes rest, a 10-minute pause after 30 minutes, after half an hour of the webinar. We understand that this current mode, let's say, is not very easy sometimes. So definitely we try to make everybody to feel comfortable and to feel okay with the webinars. And of course, you will be able to send questions that at the end of the webinar will be answered. We really hope that, I'm pretty sure we are going to have time. And the last recommendation that, as you can see, microphone and camera will not be open at the moment in order to have all the slides in the best visual form that we can. And then, of course, when you will get the final round of questions, of course, we are going to open camera and micro in order to get some more interaction between participants and the panelists, of course. Well, first of all, to introduce myself, my name is Stefano Gesuelli. I belong to the Italian Guardia di Finanza, so one of the tax environment administration institutions in Italy. I'm working in Panama currently, and currently I am in Panama because here we are all with the lockdown, as you may imagine, because I'm the head of the Italian mission at SIAT and acting as Director of Planning and Institutional Development also at SIAT. I have experience in my administration, especially in investigation units, but I think that more important for you is to understand the level of the panelists that we are going to have today, starting with Juan Francisco Redondo, who is our head of mission from Spain. So he has a large experience in the Spanish tax administration. He's working currently in the SIAT as a Spain head of mission, but also in the Spain embassy or in Panama. And very important because in the last few years, he's possibly one of the most skilled and experienced evaluator of TADAT. So TADAT is a mission from the International Monetary Fund, and of course with the participation of the other institutions such as the Inter-American Development Bank, in order to evaluate the performance of the different tax administrations. So he really knows very well the situation here in the region, but very well what are the problems, what problems are the tax administration currently facing in order to especially with information and communication technology as well. Raul Zambrano possibly doesn't need an introduction because it's very well known in the region. He was born in Quito, Ecuador, and is an engineer, a system engineer, and is the head of the director of the Technical Assistance and Technology Directorate here at SIAT. Is the brain behind, if I may say, behind the different teams the different project teams that SIAT is sending in the region. Is working currently in 6-7 countries at the same time, and we have a lot of projects at SIAT, and really is one of the, I think, in the region most skilled and experienced consultant of not only of the SIAT, because of course it's represented SIAT as well, but of many other organizations in what concern the projects about how to make the tax administration ready for the 21st century. So definitely is really very much skill about that. It was the coordinator, we may say, of the manual that you have been seeing in the short presentation. There is a really important, in our opinion, very important book, not only for tax administrators, not only for the tax officials, but definitely for all the different environments related with taxes. Because we present a lot in the CIAT, we present a lot of a different experience, and not only from the member countries, but from other organizations, other perspective, other lateral thinking about how information communication technology can have a real impact or had a real impact in the tax administration. Going forward, our third panelist is Gonzalo Arias. Gonzalo Arias is from Argentina. He's a public account with different other degrees obtained in very prestigious university or institutions. He held different positions in the Argentinian tax administration, and now currently is the International Cooperation and Taxation Director. Very important for us because we have the feelings from the perspective of the international cooperation and how the international taxation is moving nowadays, and how it's moving also through the ICT approach. So this is very important because Gonzalo is constantly in touch with different organizations, is constantly in touch with different projects as well of short-term assistance and fora about international taxation, where he can possibly give an insight about the new developments of the matter. And last but not least, of course, Socorro Velasquez, who is from the US, is currently in the US, is an extensive experience in the US Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and not only an experience in the US, but also a very large experience abroad for the IRS, because he has been working in Asia, in Turkey, in Latin America, also in the CIAT. He was one of the directors of the CIAT, and is still very connected because it's still responsible for different projects that we are developing at CIAT, not only in the region, not only Latin American region, but also in other regions of the world. And he has always been with a very practical, with a very pragmatical, but also with some very interesting experience from the different sides that he could approach all the issue related with taxation and the tax administration environments. Well, definitely, I think that whether we join from this webinar, we have different location from different, and I can see that more and more are joining from different areas of the world, from Africa, but not only, from the Caribbean, I think. I can see from Latin America. I see that definitely this is something that we are achieving from very different side of the world and from different areas of the world. And this is really important. I can see that there are more and more, possibly some late, not early birds, but late birds in this case. And we are still here. And I think that we can definitely, if you say so, to have, we see, I think that you can see in the, I don't know if you can see in the screen, but we have from Africa, from Americas, from Asia. That's very important. So we have half and half from African Americas, but we have someone also from Asia and Pacific. And this is really important in order to spread as much as we can the different approaches from, as you could see from the presentation. And I really hope that you can enjoy this webinar as well. And as I'm sure that I'm going to do. Well, we don't have time. We try to leave the floor to the panelists. So I will leave the floor to the first panelist of today, talking about the electronic tax domicile residence and the best practice for its implementation. Please, let's go with this.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you. One moment, please. Okay. Thank you, Stefano. Welcome, everybody, for this webinar. It is a pleasure to share with you this presentation about the use of the ICT in the tax administration in order to improve the development of the tax administration and its performance. Our presentation is very simple, and I think very few times small steps are very important in order to improve the performance of the tax administration. And I think this matter about the creation of electronic tax domicile is an example of that. Our proposal is that sending notification via electronic means to the taxpayer electronic domicile is like a new opportunity to continue improving the tax administration services using ICT. We think that it's possible and it's very simple to create and assign electronic domicile in the virtual office of the tax administration for the practice of tax of electronic notification. It's not the usual email taxpayer. Even this email is known to the tax administration. And it is possible to add to this utility another system, messaging system, using SMS or regular email in order to alert to the taxpayer of the arrival of new documents or the alert the assistance or notification pending confirmation. Why an electronic domicile for this notification is important? We think that the traditional practice of notification is a controversial issue due to the interpretation of legal requirements for valid notification. If we take a quick review of the regulation, the tax model code of FIAT, we could see the enormous requirements in order to make valid and effectiveness notification. The second reason is that the demographic and geographic conditions with megacities with millions of inhabitants, large deserted geographical areas with poor access, and with a situation, a circumstance very common in the developing countries, that is the absence of a standardized, well-known physical address. These circumstances cause enormous inconvenience for the tax administration in relation of this task. In addition to that, the traditional notification options imply huge costs for the tax administration, and these resources could be used in other areas. In order to establish this electronic domicile for the practice of notification, first decision we need to make some key strategic decisions. The first one is to decide if the new procedure is an exclusive or private or exclusive manner for the relationship of the taxpayer with the tax administration, or on the contrary, this electronic domicile is implemented with the framework of the state's general digitalization strategy. The second decision that we need to make is to decide if the assignment of the electronic domicile will be obligatory or mandatory for all taxpayers or for specific segments, or in other case, we could choose that this procedure could be optional or using a mixed system. And finally, it is important to have a clear rule about the effects of the notification sent to the electronic domicile of the taxpayer, and this notification is not opened by the receiver, and to decide the time, the period that it is understood that the notification has been made. In order to understand better how this new procedure works, it is important to establish some main characteristics of the system. As I said before, the system for the practice of this electronic notification consists in the assignment of electronic domicile located in the virtual office of the tax administration or in other applications that may be developed in the future. For example, an app in mobile or cellular, telephone, cellular, etc. This domicile should be associated to the regulated system of via notification via SMS or other applications. In order to access to this domicile, we think that it's necessary the use of the tax identification number, like a unique alphanumeric or assigned name by the tax administration, and it is important the use of a password and personal and non-transferable for accessing the electronic domicile with a second factor. At this point, it's important to say that the use of the digital certificate of the system's user will be available. The notification consists in the deposit of the copy of the document corresponding to the resolution in PDF or of the electronically generated document to be notified. It is necessary the indication of the appropriate appeals, the entity or official before whom they can be filed, the term for filing the appeals, and especially the certification proving the identity and integrity of the digital copy of the document to be notified or the electronically generated document. It's important in order to track the practice of the notification to have two more certifications that the system could generate or produce other certification. First one is the electronic certification of the date, the time, the day, the user, the device, and the IP of the access to the digital copy of the document deposited. And the second one is the electronic certification of the date on which the copy of the act to be notified is deposited in the electronic domicile. As we are talking about this new procedure, and we think that this procedure is more simple, safer, quicker, and cheaper for the practice of the notification. And this system has all the guarantees of authenticity, confidentiality, and integrity for the practice of this notification. I think with this general overview about this system, we have a big idea how it consists. And if you have any question after the presentation of my colleagues, I am at your disposal in order to clarify the functioning of this system. Thank you very much for your attention, and I give the floor to my colleague, Stefano. Thank you very much another time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Juan Francisco. And let's go forward definitely to Raul. We are very keen in order to listen about the best practices for tax return information and access.
Thank you, Stefano. Good afternoon to all, and good morning for those of you in the Americas. And thank you for joining us to this webinar that talks a little bit about the recent publication of SIAT that's called the ICT as a strategic tool to leapfrog the tax administrations. Of course, one of the key aspects of tax administration is returns processing. The book has a lot of information about that. I'm not going to cover all of that here. Just to let you know a little bit about kind of a evolution of returns processing. Of course, paper returns need to be processed and transformed into digital information so it can be processed. And it works through the characteristics of paper returns processing, paper-based returns. But I want to highlight, hope you can see the laser pointer here through the technology, that these may require taxpayers to present themselves in person. And I want to highlight that because of the current scenario. Of course, then we have online filing by uploading a return. It's something that's technically complex to set up. and may require third-party software by taxpayers to use. The next step is online filing by completing information on a web form, which is technically complex, it's more secure, but it's not necessarily suitable for large amounts of information. And mobile return filing, which is very, very good for returns with very few pieces of information for small taxpayers or maybe individuals with one source of income only. And then we have the risks associated with that, and it's all in the book. By the way, at the end, you will have the opportunity to see the links of where to download the book if you don't have it already. And just wanted to point out that online filing is, of course, very desirable, but you have to ensure the hardware and software is capable of handling high volumes of returns filed during peak times, probably the last minutes before the due date reaches, the last minute, not even hours. So you have to be ready for that. And with that, I will take you to what I was really wanting to talk about, which is a little bit about pre-filled tax returns. And I will start asking David to do a short poll. Sometimes we have to confess the beliefs we have, and I have to admit that I am a supporter of pre-filled tax returns, and I've been doing that for many years now, all around the countries I have visited. So just to let you know that I have, of course, a preference for them. Let's see if you have some answers, if you have some answers to see your take on this matter. Do you have the answers? So some of you, 12% strongly disagree, 4% somehow disagree. That's less than 20% in total, and the rest are, I guess, in favor of. So talking a little bit about pre-filled tax returns, most of them are for individual income tax. It gets PAYE details from employee, interest paid and earned, social security contributions, tax credits from different sources. But I want to talk a little bit about the possibility of using information coming from electronic invoices to support expenses in schooling, medical, or dental. And particularly in the case of Brazil, using the SPED system, which is a very comprehensive way of sending information to the tax administration from very different sources. It includes financial reports, electronic invoices, the accounting books, and so on. Large taxpayers in Brazil, those that are not under a simplified regime, are no longer required to file a corporate income tax, since all the information is already on a SPED. The consequences of VAT for returns, first, when we introduce electronic invoices in some of our countries, the first thing to do is to compare the totals that you would find as sales or purchases and credits and debits in individual invoices with those values totalized in tax returns, and see if there are significant differences that would trigger an audit process. But later, a process to immediate critique, like those implemented in some of the Brazilian states, were put in place, so that the moment that you are filing the VAT return, those are compared with the totals from the invoices issued by the taxpayers or where the taxpayers appears as a buyer for immediate critique. And if the differences are large enough, the taxpayers would be advised on that, avoiding penalties and so on. Another tax administrations let taxpayers know the values the tax administration has in advance. For instance, we can see here an email from the Ecuadorian tax administration to taxpayers advising them how many documents they have and the values reflected in terms of purchases and sellings and so on. So the taxpayers know in advance that information. In August 2019, the Chilean tax administration started to pre-fill VAT returns. That required changes in regulations, first to make them, all the documents recognized after 8 days. They can be considered acknowledged, and of course, the use of HADAP. That means that all VAT taxpayers in the country will get their books handled by the tax administration and will receive a proposed VAT return at the end of the month, which is very complex when you consider that it is a monthly tax period that you have to comply, and all information is there. Currently, 92.9% of collected VAT is accepted from 93.7% of taxpayers, of VAT taxpayers, accept the VAT return proposed by the tax administration. I just wanted to point it out that Ecuador started to pre-fill some VAT returns in 2019, and recently Spain has started to do so. So another question for you, going from VAT, the paper form, to pre-filled VAT in Chile. David, please. Can we see some results? Well, some of you, 10% of you maybe don't like the idea, but I think that it's really an exceptional experience what we have in Chile going right now in terms of pre-filled VAT returns. So back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Raul. Really, really interesting. And maybe it would be interesting afterwards to know what are the bad experience about this. Maybe we can go back on that with the colleagues that maybe doesn't share this enthusiasm about all the related with the VAT returns, electronic invoices. Well, I'm waiting for Gonzalo now. So Gonzalo is working and is going to tell us a little bit more about how ICT can have an impact in compliance risk management. Please, Gonzalo, the floor is yours.
Perhaps maybe you wonder why the last judgment, the paint of Michelangelo, is in the screen. I find similarities between risk management in the tax administrations and risk management in the divine sphere. For example, in the paint, you can see that some people go to the hell, another go to the heaven. But what the God use are divine powers. What we need in the tax administrations are legal powers and technology. without technology, it's not possible to assess risk. What you can see in the screen is the typical risk assessment system. Is what I consider that is mandatory today for tax administrations, because it's the difference between making decisions, making informed decisions or not informed decisions. Let's see quickly where more technology is required. Wait, go to the, for example, the first step is the risk identification. What is the job here in this step is to identify information sources, to create new information sources if it is necessary, considering the taxpayer's obligation according to the legislation, and to draft what we call the risk map. We need a lot of technology in this stage because we need big data, data warehouse to storage the big data, perhaps artificial intelligence to debug data and to control the reliability of the information, exchange of information tools, electronic invoice and document as basic data, biometric data, and other tools to assure the reliability of the taxpayer registers and others. In the second step, the job is to analyze risk, to process the information, and to evaluate the consequences of the risk. Here, we need a lot of technology, for example, predictive models, the technology that let us to calculate predictive models like decision trees, logistic regressions, neuronal networks. Artificial intelligence is necessary here, or are tools to control in real time, or monitoring tools to control in real time taxpayers, to adopt different measures to control taxpayers with high risk. The third one, prioritize risk, is not intensive in technology. We can use standard technology, our computers, to process indicators to evaluate, for example, the indicators according to different criteria: the behavior of the taxpayer, the size of the taxpayer, the business in which the taxpayer is developing its activity, or other, for example, when we have new business or business that are in bankruptcy. In that cases, we need to organize and to split taxpayers according to their level of risk, to go to the next step, treating risk. Here, we need a lot of technology, but it's not exactly the risk assessment process. To treat risk, we need a lot of systems linked with the risk assessment process that give feedback to the risk assessment process, but are not exactly this process. For example, the electronic audits for the massive sector of taxpayers, or cooperative compliance tools for big enterprises or medium enterprises with low risk. We can generate new obligations like withholding agents or information regimes to relevant actors in the value chain of business. We can apply, for example, the electronic tax address for a segment of taxpayers, or pre-filled tax return, as Raul commented us. So it's the way in which we treat the taxpayers according to their behavior, carrot or stick, depending on but for that we need technology. Then to evaluate risk, every system requires feedback. Here we are considering macro indicators and general tax compliance indicators. For example, in general tax compliance indicators, we can include the indicators of the action 11, also in the macro measurements. But what is important here is to calculate what happened, for example, before and after the controls. Is the pre-post method, or what is the difference in the the behavior of the audited taxpayer and not audited taxpayer, simply difference method. And difference in difference is the combination of both methods. Then I will go to another topic included in my presentation is the e-commerce control tools and techniques. You know that digital economy is something relatively new for tax administrations as the COVID-19. And there are similarities. Both are hard to monitor, are hard to understand. So we are, there appear new economy, digital business. We have to understand. They have high impact in the economy and in the society. Both evolves, but the most important common topic is, or issue is that there is not definitive approach to control them. Regarding tax policy, there are two approaches. We can split direct taxes from indirect taxes. There are experiences in the indirect taxes, what we call unilateral measures. I don't know what do you think about unilateral measures, but according to the international community, they are not advisable because they generate more tax burden to the taxpayer, compliance, cost, uncertainty, or can distort the global scenario. But I guess that in the short term, they were useful to collect taxes that tax administration weren't collecting. The international community, through the OECD, Plan Action 1 of BEPS and VAT Global Forum, they are suggesting a process to register companies that operate without physical presence in the country where they sell the goods and services. And the simplified registration process let them to present the return and to pay taxes. Big question, how we can control them. The other side, direct taxes are more complex. So in developing countries, you always see in statistics that we collect more indirect taxes than direct taxes. Well, it happened the same. It's more complex because we need to know more the value chain of the business. And what the international community suggests are two pillars in general. Pillar one, what recommend is to consider residual profits and to allocate them to market jurisdictions using a formulaic approach, what we call the key allocation formula. You imagine that to negotiate the formula is not easy. Then the idea is to use the arm's length principle, complex to use, to the activities that are not routinary or are complex, for example, intangibles or marketing function, distribution. And in pillar two, what they are suggesting is what they call the global anti-base erosion. It's suggesting a minimum taxation in international transactions that could have a conflict with the new measures to motivate the recovery of the economy now, or to support business in this crisis. From the tax administration side, you can see in the right side of my presentation the 12 typical risk of the digital economy. In the left side, you can see the typical electronic commerce or e-commerce or digital economy business. But the big question is what we can do. First, one of the recommendations is to apply recommendations of Action 1 of BEPS, especially those linked with tax administration, like the indirect tax ones, review tax registration systems. It is necessary to think in electronic transaction documents that are very useful as an information source. It is necessary to document and review, to study the value chain of the business, to know exactly who has the information and where is the value. We can minimize risk in some cases with advanced price agreement or safe harbors, depending on the business and the information we have. International cooperation is key and mandatory. For example, the Common Reporting Standard on Financial Information. It is possible to negotiate new automatic exchange of information sources with in the framework of multilateral conventions to access to information useful to control the digital economy. Ultimate beneficial ownership could be useful also, and it's necessary to improve horizontal cooperation in the states. It is important also to implement changes in tax conventions to increase the scope to the digital economy, to implement virtual permanent establishment, and to identify unstructured data sets in one data lake. That's very important. And to consider, for example, as I commented you before, who can provide information, perhaps postal operation, financial intermediaries, tax returns from business registered. And we can consider special criteria for documentation to support tax deductions or information from withholding agents. We can consider other traditional controls is to monitor the life quality of the taxpayers, to try to identify if they are obtaining resources from sources not declared, perhaps digital economy. Thank you very much for your attention. That's all I can comment you in the available time.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Really, really interesting. And I think that we have more, at least I have a question for you later on. So I definitely hope that we can talk a little bit more about something of the digital economy. Well, I think that it's time to take a break, a short break, 10 minutes, if you're okay. And see you in 10 minutes time. And thank you very much for your attention. Good morning again. I hope that unfortunately we couldn't invite you for a coffee, but for a virtual coffee, maybe yes. And welcome back. And I hope that everybody is still very active with this webinar. As you could see during the short break, it's very, if you're interested, I think that it's a really interesting collection of different experience. The book, the SIAD book that you could see during the break, I think that in the chat there are all the links in order to download it if you want to get some more information and more about not only, about more topics related with information and communication technologies. And definitely I think is an important tool for the future of the tax administrations all around the world. It's not a matter of developed or developing countries. It's a matter really that we are facing altogether different challenges previously unseen, and we must be ready for our taxpayers and for our economy and governments to be able to handle in a better way this new environment that in which we are working. I think that we are ready. We are ready for keeping the webinar. Socorro is there, so please, Socorro, the floor is yours about tax refunds in the post-COVID era. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano, and greetings to everyone who's online viewing the presentation. Good to see such a large crowd online. And I guess we have many reasons why this is happening today. And one of the subjects I will talk about is simply the refunds in the age of COVID-19. It certainly changed a lot of things for all of us. In fact, the way we're transmitting and getting some of these messages across, but nevertheless, it may be what may happen in the future. Much more technology interacting with seminars of this nature and other types of meetings. The issue on refunds, it's basically there's no major changes from the traditional way that funds are generated. What we had in the past continues to be the same, and in particular, a lot of these subjects are covered in the publication that we mentioned earlier. The ICT as a strategic tool to leapfrogging the efficiency of tax administrations. So the chapter on 4.4 covers a good deal of the refund process and what refunds are available in different types of scenarios. The current situation where we have with the COVID-19, many jurisdictions took actions to implement other tax policy and tax administration changes. We're having a little difficulty with the video, so I'll be saying next to David, who is in Panama. I'm in Florida, and then he will be changing the video. So David, let's go to the next slide. Why the changes and what changes have occurred. We are possibly employing much more electronic fund transfers in the way that we do these refunds rather than a paper check. As we all understand, the social distancing is not just a physical one, it's also an electronic one. We're seeing that in several situations, and I'll talk about in a few minutes a publication that was put together by SIAT, IOTA, and OECD, and where there's a significant reduction of audits, field audits. And one of the reasons is avoid contact, physical contact, transmission of the disease. So we've got a situation here which is somewhat unique, and that and in many ways new to us, where we need to operate in this environment. The impact is for many reasons. And the next slide, David. and and most of the changes are on the tax policy side, as I mentioned. They are affecting both corporate income tax, personal income tax, value-added tax, and Social Security contributions. The greater contact with the states is with the population. And as we have seen in the past, just about the tax administration that has the most direct contact with the general public is the tax administrations. Many of us go a lifetime without touching base with any other agency other than the tax administration, whether we care for it or not. Next. There was a recent publication that I mentioned, and I recommend if you get an opportunity online, download it, because it simply captures all the different implementations that tax administrations around the world are taking to enhance the whole economic situation, but primarily for a perspective of increasing cash flow. So if you say, well, why the reason for all the changes? They're all economic. They're all primarily to have more funds out on the street in people's pockets and be able to continue spending and be able to continue supporting the economy. The objectives that's listed in this slide are not solely for the economy and specifically for cash flow. It also supports other sectors. It supports the areas of health. It supports certain functions such as the airlines. It supports also some of the cruise companies. I'll hear the comment every now and then, why the cruise companies? They're registered in Panama and Liberia. Well, because they're US companies and I use the model of the US, and nevertheless, they need to be considered as far as providing the support for that economic situation as a result of the current pandemic. Next. There's three vital areas when we look at enhancing the whole commercial business sector and improving individual cash flow. There's one that really hits the tax administration, and it goes back to my comment. Why the tax administration, and why isn't this done by some other entity? Simply because the fact is that the tax administration tends to touch everybody. There is one very vital, important element in this, and it deals with refunds. And it deals with corporate income tax refunds, individual, personal income tax, and it deals with value-added tax. And the major factor is process time. I'll talk in a few minutes about the whole number of weeks it takes to do these things, but we have seen that process time has been a major issue for many entities. And when we look at the time it takes to refund a value-added tax sum, it varies significantly. And I don't want to make another commercial advertising here, but if you look at page 107 of the before mentioned publication on ICT, there is a chart. And when we looked at how long does it take to have that refunded to the taxpayers, the leaders of 14 weeks are OECD high income countries. The ones that are possibly in 5th place, 6th place, have 35 weeks for refunds, and these are primarily in Latin America and the Caribbean. There is one particular country, though, that has 106 weeks to provide a value-added tax refund. I won't mention the country, so you could possibly go look at the publication on page 107, but I would think 106 weeks would possibly defeat the purpose of providing significant cash flow in business and individuals' pockets. Next. What tax actions are being taken by these entities? several. And as we saw in the prior slide, it addresses different purposes, not strictly just taxation, but it addresses a good side of tax policy. There's a publication, as I mentioned, that came out recently, which was the CIO, the OECD book titled "The Tax Administration Response to COVID-19: Measures Taken to Support Taxpayers." And that publication has a good deal of information in it that possibly makes us think and work a little differently from a tax administration perspective that we did in the past. It has 4 critical areas, and they are: 1, additional time for dealing with tax affairs, including consideration. This has been implemented primarily by delaying payment, delaying filing of tax returns. The other is quick refunds, which is a major one. Temporary change to audit policies, where countries are not going out to audit taxpayers in the field for very obvious reasons. And enhanced taxpayer communication. And this one is possibly extremely significant too. It's how we're doing business today. That's why we're here on Zoom, speaking to a good part of the tax world, tax administration world, and why maybe David and Stefano and I are communicating via WhatsApp on the phone while we're making this presentation simultaneously, and possibly you're checking on your emails too. So technology comes into the picture in a very big way. One thing that I find significant is how we've changed as tax officials, and in myself as a former tax officials. It's funny how the pandemic could change one's characters from possibly a tough type of administrator that we want to be. Why? Because we want to be out there and make sure that people are paying their due amount of taxes. But it changed. It changed overnight. With these changes, it's like, and if you look at the OECD publication I just mentioned, if you look at that, it's like, don't worry, take your time. You stay with our money, enjoy it, pay me later. We're here to help you. And it goes a little bit contrary to what I grew up with in a tax administration. Next. We are looking at some of the slides, and I posted some of the countries that you could see what changes or what temporary modifications they're making to their tax policy and to their tax administration rules in order to comply and be able to accomplish this cash flow process that needs to be out there in commerce. Next. We've got Ireland, as we mentioned, there are several. Next. And basically, it covers the entire globe, anywhere from Europe to Africa to Asia to the Americas. I don't think Australia, New Zealand, I don't think there's one that hasn't taken some type of measure to be able to make available funds for individuals and for corporate entities. Next. Okay, let me speak a little bit about the U.S. economic impact payment. And basically, here again, the purpose is cash flow. And this one possibly has been done by other countries. I know for sure Panama, with the $80 per month stipend for individuals and families. In the US, it's not a monthly thing. It's just a one-time thing. It's $1,200 per taxpayer, or $2,400 per household, and $500 for dependents under the age of 18. And just about anybody's eligible, US citizens and resident aliens. A tax return does not have to be filed. You could contact the IRS and they will look at making sure you get your payment via check or electronic fund transfer. The conditions are pretty good. It's not a refundable amount. It's not taxable. Unfortunately, the only ones who won't get it are those guys who are in prison or haven't paid their child support. But that's an extremely small number of individuals. Hopefully these funds could provide some immediate cash flows for the local businesses. Unfortunately, those were closed until this past Monday here, at least in the part of Florida I live, and are starting to open up, and people are starting to go out to the beauty parlor, the salons and restaurants and things like that. Next. This is not my check. A friend borrowed it, and I was willing to just show you a little bit of the paper check came to them rather than electronic fund transfer, since they hadn't filed a return recently, and the IRS cannot transfer electronically. But that's basically how a good part of the population are receiving their stipend. Next. And lastly, but not least, I just want to focus on the social networks to support the initiative. This is what IRS basically is doing on a daily basis with LinkedIn. They're also created a special section on the website, and the US is not unique in this. I've noticed that a lot of the countries are doing the same, to be able to provide information to small business organizations such as mom and pop shops as to what benefits they could derive from the new laws that provide benefits for them not to immediately pay their taxes, to take special deductions and exemptions, and to help them be able to process through this pandemic situation as comfortably as possible. And basically, that's all I have to say. It's a pleasure seeing you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, Carl, I think that you have already put on the table different interesting topics for all of us, and I'm pretty sure we can expand something in the questions, let's say, space. And about that, I would like to tell you that as someone already did, of course, you can formulate your question. There is a down in the Zoom screen, there is an area for that. And of course, feel free to make your questions in order to be answered at the end of the current presentation. With no more delay, thank you very much, Raul, again, in order to make your presentation about the current account. Thank you very much, Raul.
Thank you, Stefano, and I will try to be short and to keep it under 5 minutes. So the tax current account, it's the material is in the book, so if you are interested, please go ahead and take a look. But tax current account is not a banking current account. It is a centralized process where all financial and monetary elements derived from tax obligations should be recorded, either from tax returns, from payments, prepayments, remittances, assessment, refunds, installment plans, the results of arrears collections, decisions to objections or appeals, amnesties, pardons, everything should be there. The key thing is that the current account should guarantee the correct computation of interest, penalties, and particularly the imputation of payments, either if a payment should go first to penalties, interest, tax, or whatever the particular law or tax code mandates. And that includes the transfer of tax credits between different debts of the same taxpayers, or even in some countries, the possibility to sell tax credits for other taxpayers to use. So it can be very simple, like this example where you have a tax return and the payment received, which is pretty straightforward, but it could be as complex as you can see here, with every period reflects the interest that's being applied because of, I guess, a late payment of the taxpayers. One interesting thing that you have to keep in mind is that even if things go wrong for some reason, either a mistake from the tax administration or more commonly by a mistake of the taxpayers, things should be reflected in the tax current account, not a reprocessing that would make things disappear, but that would reflect that something was wrong and needed to be corrected. So everything should be there to for further review or for even record keeping for both the taxpayers and the tax administration. We can see here a credit or debit transaction where it goes as a debit from a prepayment and a credit for income tax return. So that's a way you see two different accounts with the implications that we can see. And then I want to remind you about some IT considerations that are important. First is the atomicity that a transaction should keep. The system must guarantee that a transaction is fully completed or not at all started. And that is particularly important when you are making transfer of credits from one account to the other, either because it's a prepayment of, for instance, withholding account to an income tax, because it's a transfer from one taxpayer to the other, because of some acquisition of companies, or because it has been on the market as a way to process refunds without actually giving money back to taxpayers. But it should be there with the consequences for all accounts of all taxpayers involved completely at the same time. Of course, consistency is really, really important, and the durability of information in long terms. And this has implications because you need to guarantee that both taxpayers can query the status of their account, and officials and officers of the tax administrations can do so. And interestingly, a summarized way should be made available over the phone. So with that, I will leave you with one last question for all of you to talk a little bit about this current account in your own environment. If you have one, or if you don't have one, if there are other facilities in the information systems that support these kind of features. Let's see some results, David. So still room for improvement, as many would say. 42% of you reported that still these kind of facilities are not ready in your tax administration. So an opportunity for all of us to take a look at that and improve. So with that, and saving time for questions, I'll give you the floor back to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much. And well, definitely we went forward a different presentation, and we are ready, I think, for a couple of final ideas, if you allow me, and maybe to start afterwards a small conversation, a short conversation with all of you panelists, and not only the panelists. What I would like to say is definitely to land a little bit all these, all the concepts and all the experiences that you gave us in order to the current situation of the COVID-19 or post-COVID-19, whatever you may call it. And definitely, I think that the current situation makes that the ICT generally to move in an ICT environment, in an ICT-oriented environment, for tax administrations is not an option. It's something that we have to do because every day more, I think that our taxpayers are moving in this environment, and they need to have tax administrations in the same page as well. So with a different or an improved, let's say, capacity and skills in order to handle all this. Of course, this means that the impact can be really strong for all the tax administrations, and of course for tax administrations that are maybe in a process of developing their skills and capabilities. So this is an impact that we have to think about, because I think that, and this is maybe another item for the discussion, that possibly we need new professionals for the tax administration. I mean that we are, able to go in the market, professionals from different areas that are related with the traditional tax administration, maybe enough to have to think in a different way, and to develop programs for recruiting people from the university or from the private sector with different skills. And this is something that possibly we have to do quite quickly. And this is a challenge for human resource of a tax administration in a traditional way. At the same time, this means possibly that we can stimulate, and this is a question that I would like to do now, the end of the digital divide. In many countries, we still, even in so-called developed countries, we see that there is a digital divide between different areas of the countries, different social area of the countries, and this is something that possibly is no longer an option for the country, for the governments. We have to face this from our perspective. And one of the few, I think that was one of the comments that I saw in the question and answer that someone put at the end. Definitely there is a need for improving the quality of the information that the tax administration is handling. Quality of information is key in a digital environment, is really key, is really important in a digital environment. Definitely we have to orient our processes in order to have the best quality of information as we can, and to go, of course, the best outcomes for our taxpayers in this different age after the COVID, and not only after the COVID, possibly in the 21st century. I don't know if you agree with this. I hope that we can see some more questions about, but I would like to move a little bit forward to the short question for for the panelists, and of course to get questions if you have from the floor. First question is from me. I mean that I was starting. Yes, I think that we are okay with the conference, with the sharing. Is for Juan Francisco Redondo. Do you think, and it's about the digital divide, do you think that to start improving these electronic residence domicile and so on can be a problem with the current digital divide in some country? Is an impossible marriage? It's something that we can handle in some way? Thank you very much, Juan Francisco, for your answer.
Thank you, Stefano, for the question. I think in my presentation, I told about the some strategic decision in order to improve this tax domicile for the practice notification. And one of them, it was that we need to decide if this electronic domicile is mandatory for all taxpayers, for segment of taxpayers, or the use of a mixed system. The reason behind this question, this decision, is that we couldn't assure that all businesses or physical persons have the means in order to accept this kind of communication. The digital gap is a problem, and that's the reason that we need to make this decision. Normally, in the Latin American countries, the system for the practice of notification, electronic notification, is mandatory only for businesses and for physical persons with professional activities, and for enterprises. because the particular taxpayer, maybe they have some problems in order to have the connections, the good connection, or to have good access to internet, etc. And I think maybe it's the main point in this case is to achieve that this kind of segment of taxpayer could have this procedure. It's important to say in this area that normally in the Latin American countries and other countries, it's now mandatory the presentation of tax return by electronic means. And I think it is a very important step in order to improve another utilities for the relation with the taxpayer. The first step is to introduce the electronic presentation of tax returns and the electronic payments. After that, it's possible to introduce another means like the electronic notification that we were talking in this presentation. I think maybe it's clear now that this impossible marriage between the electronic domicile and the gap of the tax, of the digital gap. If you have another question, Stefano, I'm at your disposal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Juan. Very, very interesting and very, very complete your answer. This was my doubt. Thank you very much for clarifying that with your fantastic presentation and this answer. And now going to the next question that I have for Gonzalo is about, and thank you very much, Gonzalo, also for your presentation again. Definitely, I'm not a technical, an IT person. I'm not a very, very skilled, let's say, digital economy expert. I would like to have from you a definition of the post-COVID-19 taxation of digital economy for dummies as me. So please, what is your thinking about how could be the taxation of the digital economy now? Because we have a lot of new sectors that started to move in a digital environment after the COVID.
Thanks, Stefano. Very good question. It invites us to think about the new situation, considering the social distancing. I guess that, as you mentioned, the economy is changing, but faster. Now there will appear new actors or players in the digital economy. For example, small and medium enterprises and professionals. Now we know that restaurants can work, as we know, they work with delivery, and you can order through internet, or perhaps to exchange currency can happen the same, or to shop clothes, or to give services, professional services. That's a challenge, a new challenge for the tax administration, because usually we were focused on Netflix or the big companies, Google, but what we can do with a new digital economy in the massive sector. I guess that we have to consider new information regimes. Perhaps we can trust in the electronic audit or electronic controls, using several information sources, like, for example, insurance, public services, expenditures from condomines, from Cheverly, private school, real estate, financial market, supermarkets, to try to reconstruct, rebuild the life of the taxpayers, and to control them using simplified regimes like that integrate taxes and let tax administration to control them as a low cost. We know that individuals and small and medium enterprise usually use the money in the country. That's the advantage. We will have local digital economy and not an international digital economy, but hard to control. Regarding the international digital economy, there are solutions, but I guess that we will need to discuss more, to investigate more, to be more innovative, and to evaluate the experiences to make a decision. Because I trust that the new VAT suggestions, the simplified registration from companies that don't have presence in the country, will be very useful, and will have a good impact in the tax collection in this crisis context. But I don't know, as I comment in my presentation, what will happen with the income tax. I guess that we need to simplify ways to tax the digital economy, perhaps a safe harbor, but it is under discussion, is the US proposal. Well, that's my comments, Stefano, and I guess that we can continue comment with participants.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Really, really interesting. I think that is one of the many challenges that we are going to face for the next future. And quickly to go to Socorro for another question, but before that, I would like to say that at the end of this question time, we are going to have a question for you also, in order to know if you like this webinar and the format and so on. So please stay after the questions in order to vote for this before finishing and closing this interesting webinar. Well, going to Socorro, I think that we have heard a lot about helicopter money. I mean, the need in during these difficult times to have a lot of money coming from the government to the taxpayers, citizens, and companies. And this is, of course, something that, as you mentioned about the refunds, it's a little bit hard, in my opinion, at least, to be carry on the control and the audits as we have been used until now. I would like to think, what are your thoughts about this point? Thank you very much, Socorro.
Thank you, Stefano. That's a wonderful question that deserves a wonderful answer. How many hours we got left? No, but I would say first, I don't envy the tax auditors in 2022 who need to look at these returns that were filed in 2021 for fiscal year 2020. And only the good Lord knows how long this will continue. I just don't think the helicopter money, as one economist coined the phrase, will be a severe problem. I think a good portion of what has been sent in some places, I'll use the US model, which is the one I know best. The funds are not taxable. Nor do individuals need to repay the government. So in that sense, it'll be okay. I'm sure there'll be a lot of corrupt ways of getting money from the government, like any other tax situation, and that may not change. But I think it'll be somewhat limited. I will say that there is one way of doing it, and Gonzalo spoke to us in depth about it, and it's the whole issue about compliant risk management. There's been several publications, and I'm sure most of us have already seen them. One was from Fiscal Affairs Department over to OECD, and it was a compliance risk management audit case selection system. And I think in the past years, more and more tax administrations are fine-tuning that tool. In the case of the US, again, is the discriminant function system. It's basically computer scoring. There are several ways returns are selected. One, matching third-party information. Two, having your ex-spouse rat on you and say you had millions stored away. Three, simply computer scoring and looking at what elements in that industry, in that tax return, are suspect because of excessive deductions, excessive depreciation, possibly having funds saying that in small corporations, corporations like that, where the owners are the shareholders, and there are some changes to the current tax rules to be able to provide that cash flow. And one of them is the ability of now having to pay the Social Security contribution now, wait later. So the corporation can make use of some of those funds. They could also get credits for wages they'd have to pay to employees even though they're not there. So the point is, there'll be some schemes, and one scheme may be, I'm going to pay my 3-year-old daughter $4 million for services she provides. Well, I think that will definitely float up to the top in any scoring system, in any risk management model. The truth is they work well. And in the US case, when returns come out for audit and they're screened and then they go through the process, be it mail, office, or field audits, generally about 89% lead to an adjustment, of course, in the favor of the IRS. So I would put a lot of emphasis on those particular areas. I think that the major problems as far as corporations will continue to be those that we have known in the past: transfer pricing, issues with their stock and trade of stock and transfer to, or compensation for the executives, excessive compensation, expensing, and on and on. And I think that we will continue focusing in on high income filers and non-filers. They won't benefit as much from these new laws to help the economy and provide cash flow, but nevertheless become an issue. And I was reading yesterday in Bloomberg.com where there's a really super sad situation, and it's that the super rich can't leave New York back to their tax haven, and they exceeded their 183-day period in Manhattan. So all of a sudden they are US taxpayers. Why? Because there's no flights back to where they came from, and triggered the US liability situation for worldwide taxation. And I think that's what they'll focus on. I would say, go back, just to wrap up, and say that fine-tuning your compliant risk model is vital, and making sure that all these criteria are in there for the changes that we're doing temporarily. As my abuelo used to say, en guerra avisada no muere soldado. So if they're ready for this and they do these changes now, they've got 2 years to work on and improve their systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Socorro. Really, it was a wonderful answer. Definitely. Thank you very, very much for sharing your thoughts on that, because I think it's really interesting to think for all the tax administrations around the world. Well, I'm going to Raul for my last question, at least. I think that also according to my final considerations, at least, when we are talking, when we have been talking before this year of big data, possibly now in a post-COVID-19 era, we must be start talking about even bigger data than the information that the tax administration had available before. What do you think on that?
Thank you, Stefano. And I guess my short answer should be yes. But once that I have the floor, I will try to elaborate a little bit on that. If you remember when we were talking about returns processing and the pre-filled VAT return, we have to keep in mind that all invoices are in electronic format, being online filed to the tax administration. Those are billions of documents. That means in a country like Mexico, 200 documents per second are getting to the tax administration. So the only way to process that amount of information and not get intoxicated with the quantity of data that is there is to use very advanced technology. It's the only way to do that. And that means that we were already involved of using big data analytics, artificial intelligence, and this new technology just to deal with the amount of third-party information that we were using with electronic invoicing, with reports from banks, and so on. So now, after the new normal is implemented, certainly the old ways of auditing, of selecting taxpayers, of visiting taxpayers will be significantly diminished in terms of physical presence. So that will have to be replaced with more electronic, let's call it IC. And that inspection should take into account more and more unstructured data that will come from the news, from social media, from the things that appear in Facebook, in your Facebook account, but maybe in other people's Facebook accounts. So that should be put together and take into the tax administration. For instance, there is a quite interesting proof of concept project that we developed with the Chilean tax administration, where you go through the details of an electronic invoice to understand the concepts that are involved there and try to see if those elements that you are claiming a credit for in terms of VAT are actually valid, because those products or services are related with your economic activity. So I'm not just paying for an executive's expenses or so on. So the short answer is yes, it will be more necessary than ever to use new technology, big data, big and advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, and things like that. So with that, I think I will give the floor back to you, Stefano, so we can maybe end the presentation and take some answers from the audience.
Thank you, Raul. Definitely, really interesting. And yeah, I would like. I don't want to. Well, this is already the poll about the webinar, and there are some question and answer. I don't know if we have some short time in order. I think that some is already answered, but maybe. I don't know if you can see on the screen. We have how you manage to control pre-filled tax return, because we need huge information from third parties. I think that this is something that we have already, at least Socorro tried a little bit to say in his answer. I don't know if someone wants to add something. And then I'm going to read the 4 questions that we still have. And then, of course, if someone wants to pop in and to answer the question, of course, is very welcome.
Maybe I could start with those two, the first 2 questions. The first one is regarding with the tax returns. Yes, you need a lot of third-party information, but not only that, you need to take care of the quality of the information that came. It's not enough to get information, but it should be of reasonable, decent quality in order for you to use that information correctly. And going to the second question about IT governance and so on, certainly this was not the presentation for that, but a little advertisement. In 15 days, in 2 weeks, we will have another webinar that will be just for IT people. You can, of course, all are welcome, but it will be talking about tools and managing IT and a roadmap to implement this new technology and things like that. So you are all very welcome to join us in 2 weeks to talk a little bit about that.
Okay, and maybe we can consider also the third question in the next webinar, something like that, about the control for the security control for personnel that are using personal equipment. What do you think?
Certainly, we will talk about that on that webinar in 2 weeks.
Oh, thank you very much. And the last one is, in Africa, most of taxpayers are in informal economic sector, illiterate. How to marry, and we get again with this word marry, this contradiction. Yeah, I think it was a little bit what Juan Francisco was answering in the first question. I don't know if someone from the panelists wants to add something, or
yes, maybe yes. Before, just to let you know, in chapter 4 of the book, there is a section that deals with precisely special regimes directed to small taxpayers, and you are invited to take a look at that. It's specifically deals with this issue. So Gonzalo, please go ahead.
Thanks, Raul. No, I guess that when we talk about the new COVID situation, digital economy and informality or underground economy, yes, there is a link, but we have to find opportunities. Imagine that this new reality or new standard with social distancing, people who work in the informal business or informal market need to be digital economy or e-commerce. So this is an opportunity for the tax administration if there is a way to control the digital economy, the local or domestic digital economy. The other part that will continue working in the traditional economy, we will see it will be the same. So the same challenge we have in Africa, Latin America, and some Asian country. We will need to continue trying to integrating society to make them be formal. One of the solutions is the simplified regimes. I comment you in my last question, or the question I forgot Stefano formulated to me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Gonzalo. I think that we are at the end of this webinar, and thank you very much for all of you. You stayed with us. I saw that the results are really, really interesting, and thank you very much for that interest about this webinar, and of course the next ones that we are going to have from the CIAT, and definitely even in this difficult or different situation, it's a pleasure to share with you and to share with all of the participants our thoughts and experience. And we are facing a new era. Definitely, I think that we are boosting something that we have done a little bit earlier, but maybe because we were a little bit in our comfort zone, maybe we didn't do as tax administrations. All the related issue with information and communication technologies are something that we have to face. You could see from the questions that we have a lot of issues still on the to face and to solve, of course, and maybe different also perspectives that we can use in order to achieve better results for our governments and our taxpayers at the end of the day. So thank you very much again for your participation. Definitely thank you to the panelists for sharing their knowledge and experience. And I hope to see you very soon. First of all, in our next webinars, and afterwards, I hope not in a long period of time, personally in a presential event, because it means that definitely we left all this emergency behind. Thank you very much. Stay safe. Take care of you, and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best regards to all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.